Hey everyone, welcome back to the Questioning Behaviour podcast. As always, you're here with me, Merle, and with Sarah, my much better co-host.
You're the dummy that don't believe in science. All your projects always be denying. You're the dummy that don't believe in
And today we are joined by a very special guest who I'm very surprised was able to make the time between his many jobs, his many projects, and his many books. So say hi, everyone, to Cass. Cass, please introduce yourself to the audience. Who are you? What do you do? And how did you get there?
I'm Cass Sunstein. Right now I'm working in the United States government. I continue to be a professor at Harvard Law School on leave. I'm chair of a technical advisory group to the World Health Organization, and I'm the lucky parent of 2 children and 2 dogs. Not quite the parent of 2 dogs, maybe I'm the companion animal of 2 dogs.
Oh, you're not the pack leader?
No, I'm the pack follower. I follow.
Oh, I see.
Clear hierarchy there.
I guess my first question is, where do you find the time?
Well, I find the time without a great deal of difficulty. I guess when I was an academic until relatively recently, I tried to make sure I had writing time in the mornings typically, and I tried to make sure I set aside any time that people would like me to set aside for things that involve public service. And I sleep 8 hours, not more than that. I find time management actually not terribly hard. I try not to spend a lot of time on things that are useless or involve very long meetings that could have been very short meetings. And time management, I find, is not a great challenge.
Clearly spoken by someone who is very efficient, which I guess has served you well. Guys, I guess the main question that we always ask people is, how did you get into behavioral science? But I feel like in your case, most people do know that story. But I mean, would you be able to summarize it rather quickly, given that I think, from my perspective, your just initial leap into behavioral science was nudge?
It actually started a long time before then. So
Okay.
As a young law professor, I was at the University of Chicago, which had tremendous economists, some of the world's best, who were committed to rational actor models. Gary Becker was in some ways the leader of the pack. Speaking of leaders of the pack, George Stigler didn't follow many people. Milton Friedman was certainly a presence, though he was physically in California at the time. Ronald Coase, who won the Nobel Prize also, Richard Posner, who was at the law school and greatly influenced by economic analysis of law. So I was surrounded by these extraordinary people who were committed to rational actor accounts, and I greeted them with admiration and awe inside my young heart, but also skepticism. I felt that their understanding of human behavior was wrong. But I had been a literature student in college before I went to law school. I was not trained in psychology or economics, really. I had a little tiny bit of economics training. And my clueless skepticism led me to read Thaler and Kahneman and Tversky. This would have been in the early 80s, I think. I was directed actually to Thaler by an economist law professor who's trained as both, who thought that Thaler was full of nonsense. But I was writing a paper on commitment strategies and the shifting nature of preferences. And my economist friend, this was actually in a locker room near a squash court, my economist friend said, "That paper you're writing sounds awful, but there's a guy named Thaler at Cornell who's written a similarly awful paper on the same topic, and you should read Thaler. He's bad, like you."
Oh,
wow.
And so I read Thaler's Toward a Positive Theory of Consumer Choice, paper from 1981, and I found it electrifyingly good. And that led me to Kahneman Tversky. I actually taught a course in, I think, the mid 80s on rationality, in which Kahneman Tversky's prospect theory and heuristics and biases papers played a prominent role. And then I started working on behavioral science and behavioral economics and law and policy, and I wrote a paper on it, and it influenced other papers. And then Thaler moved from Cornell to the University of Chicago, and when I heard about that, I was extremely excited, and I wrote him a note of admiration, a kind of fan note, greeting him. And I don't think he responded to the letter. He might have found the letter terrible. We haven't discussed it. But we did have lunch shortly after he came to the University of Chicago, and we hit it off immediately. I loved him, and we had complementary interests and talents. Of course, he's an economist who was a founder of behavioral economics, and I was interested in law and public policy, which he was increasingly interested in. And he mentioned that he had started a paper with Christine Joles, a lawyer and economist then at Harvard, on behavioral economics and law. I was working on the same topic, and they were going at a relatively slow pace. And I kept asking him, "How's your paper coming? I can't wait to see it." And eventually I said to him, if you don't write this paper, I'm going to. And that a little bit as a threat, a little bit as a prod. I want to write the paper. And he said, well, why don't you join us? Why don't we write it together?
Excellent.
And so we wrote a paper, a very long paper in the Stanford Law Review about behavioral law and economics. And that was really what launched the collaboration between Thaler and me. And we followed that up a few years later with a paper on libertarian paternalism, which basically was an improvement on the last section of the paper in the Stanford Law Review, which was about we're not paternalists, but we're anti-paternalists. There was a section about anti-paternalism. And that was an entree into what became libertarian paternalism. And so I was basically off to the races, I think, after I first read Thaler on consumer choice.
Wow. That is a fabulous story of how you guys met. I think that's definitely worthy of a movie origin story, the Nudge origin story for sure. I mean, speaking of your collaboration, you guys are about to publish, or by the time this comes out, have already published sort of the reworking of Nudge. So why return back to Nudge? 10, has it been over 10 years since that book came out?
Extremely funny story about behavioral biases hitting the authors of Nudge. So I had been somewhat interested in doing a revised version of the book, maybe every 3 years or so. I thought there's a lot going on, maybe we should. And Thaler had thought that's a really terrible idea, so no. And I wasn't that interested in doing a revised version. I was just a little interested. Then it turned out we learned that the contracts for paperback and European editions of the book had expired, and maybe the contract for the paperback edition itself had expired. And so we learned actually relatively late that there was a contract renewal to come up. And the publisher asked us, would you give bonus material? And I thought that was a good idea. And I actually had a little plan that I have a paper called Misconceptions about nudges, and Thaler has a Nobel lecture, which is very relevant. Maybe we give the Nobel lecture in my Misconceptions chapter, and then we declare victory. And then both of us read what we had in pandemic year in our home offices, that is old editions of the book, and we saw there were references to technologies that were obsolete, and there was a chapter about how to deal with the problem of same-sex marriage that kind of made no sense anymore. And we had some cultural references that were wildly out of date. And we thought, you know what, we need to refresh this. We need to make it contemporary. And then when we did that, it was a little like refurbishing a home, where people may think, you'll make some broken down room a little better. Mm-hmm. And then while you're at it, why don't you make the room next to it better too? And you are completely redoing a home that you only intended to do a little thing to. We call it the while you are at it bias. Mm-hmm. We fell very much victim to it. So the book became a massive overhaul. And we did not anticipate doing that when we started. We threw out some of the chapters that just really dated, and we added a ton of new material.
How did you feel about it at the end of that process? How did you feel at the end of your complete home renovation?
Well, I'll tell you, at the end, thrilled that we did it. It was a joy. Thaler is the best guy to work with. He's funny and fun, and he's when he's difficult, it's great.
Okay.
So I love him, and redoing it was having redone it was a joy. Redoing it was partly a joy and partly just, oh my gosh, what have we gotten ourselves into? So my own reaction, and Dick is actually very funny about this, is he was not doing a whole lot in the summer in which we completely redid the book. So he had some time. I was finishing Noise, a book with Olivier Sibony and Danny Kahneman. I was also doing a number of other things. So it was not an open time for me. And the fact that we ended up doing so much, I felt was amazingly good, and in a way, a challenging surprise. So during it, I was mostly overjoyed. Having done it, I was completely overjoyed. At times doing it, I thought, we didn't decide to do this, but we are.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I mean, you mentioned, some of the work that you and Thaler had done sort of since the original Nudge came out, was sort of about addressing a lot of the misconceptions around Nudge. And, Nudge is still very widely talked about. I mean, for the record, is there a misconception that keeps coming up that you sort of really would wish people would stop talking about?
Yeah, the one I like least is that nudges are a form of manipulation. That's my least favorite. Because
and you get this often?
Yeah, often. So from critics. So if you think of a GPS device, is that a form of manipulation? Is a label that tells you, if you have an allergy to shrimp and peanuts, probably should stay away from this food. If you go to an airport and it tells you where the restrooms are and helps you navigate the place, is that a form of manipulation? That's very very hard, I think, to argue. There's some interesting questions about how to think about default rules and order effects, but it's good to particularize the nudge and think, is that something that runs into the objection to manipulation? And usually the answer is no. The answer isn't always no, but that objection I run into, and I think it's valuable to be concerned about manipulation. That's very important. But nudges typically are not manipulative.
I mean, even if someone somehow manages to argue that the allergen information on a packet of nuts, for example, or on anything that contains nuts, if that is to be argued to be manipulation, you know what? I'll take it. I'm allergic to nuts. I'll take the manipulation. I'd rather be aware. I'd rather be manipulated out of eating this food. But
I think it's correct. But in informing people of risks to which they might be subject is not manipulative. So
no.
we need an account of what manipulation is, and then we need to assess various practices by reference to the account. And I actually have a lengthy paper on that, and the core of the argument is in the new edition of Nudge about defining manipulation. And it becomes a little bit of a fussy philosophical debate about definitions. And I like that fussy philosophical debate. And I also like the concern about manipulation. So the idea that some uses of behavioral science, for example, where people aren't given clarity or aren't given an opportunity really to attend carefully to a term of an agreement to which they are bound because of how the contract or the online interaction is structured, to deem that as a form of manipulation, I think is fair. And to say that some behavioral bias or limitation is being exploited might be fair also. Selective attention might be the thing that's being exploited. Inertia might be the thing that's being exploited. So dark patterns can be manipulative, and to explore that's really interesting and important. I'm actually pretty focused on that these days. To see nudges as such as manipulative is preposterous. If you're told something about don't swim today unless you're a strong swimmer because the current is going really strong and it's dangerous, that's not manipulative.
No, that's just life-saving, really, if you think about it for more than 0.1 seconds. I in general, I have a question for you which goes way beyond Nudge. You have written, if I may say so, a fuck ton of books. My main question is, well, I have two questions regarding that, and they are how and why.
The why's question is easy to answer. I really enjoy it. So it's a little like I play two racket sports, squash and tennis, and I really enjoy them. So I'm playing tennis once today and squash once tomorrow, and I wish I were playing squash and tennis more today and tomorrow. I really like it. So writing I greatly enjoy. So there's a lot of writing I do that I don't like enough to publish, and I keep working at it until I think it's maybe I'm wrong, but until I think it's worth publishing. But I enjoy the act of writing. It's to try to figure something out in that way is for me really fun. Even when it's hard, it's really fun. And how? I think the best answer I have is I can start pretty quickly. So if I have a topic and an idea, I can get writing pretty quickly. Not that I can get writing well quickly, but I can get words on a page quickly. And then I might abandon it, or I might more likely work really hard to try to make it less bad.
Fair enough.
So President Obama says you can't edit a blank page. And I find it easy to make a page not blank. And I guess that's how. I don't find it easy to make a page worthy of anyone reading, but I do find it easy to fill a page.
Right. So on top of all the books and obviously the academic articles that we've already seen by you, how many are secretly still hiding in the cupboard?
Well, I think there are probably, 7 or so books that are hiding, but they're abandoned. Thank goodness. They're not good. I do have one on bounded rationality, with a terrific co-author, Sanjit Dami, that's coming out from MIT Press. It's a very long book in 2022. I'm working in the U.S. government now, so I'm not doing any academic writing. In fact, I'm just writing emails and government documents now, and they don't have much personality. I miss that, but it's an honor to get to work in the government.
Yeah, it's super impressive. I mean, we're both PhD students, currently writing up, so that's why we're so interested in the act of writing and how to motivate yourself to do it. But you've mentioned now, I guess, your work in the government, so it's going to be an awkward segue. But from your perspective, what is the state of behavioral science in public policy? Could you speak on that? Where is it now compared to where it was 10 years ago?
It's extraordinary in all the best ways. So I've worked with the World Health Organization and the United Nations a lot in the past year or so. And the United Nations recently announced behavioral science initiative from the Secretary General personally. And there was a very large event in which the Secretary General emphasized the importance of behavioral science for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And the UN is very activated for poverty reduction, for environmental protection, etc., with the use of behavioral science. And there are extraordinary things happening there that are public. The World Health Organization, the Director General, is personally very committed to the use of behavioral science. There's a new behavioral insights project at the World Health Organization, which has been dealing with COVID-19, of course, but it's a much broader initiative, and I have some visibility into that because I'm chair of the technical advisory group there. In the United Kingdom, of course, they've long had the Behavioral Insights team, which is now doing work all over the world, and they are often setting the standard, and they've grown by leaps and bounds. There's excellent work being done in Australia at the OECD. New Zealand has a number of people who are terrific in this domain. The Netherlands certainly is one of the world's leader. India has relatively recently engaged behavioral science at high levels to deal with safety and health issues in particular. And I could give a much longer I bore you. But basically, the range and sophistication of uses of behavioral science is so impressive compared to where it was even 3 years ago. And one of the best things that I'm seeing is the creativity of people who are, various nations, various ages, various levels of training. They can be people who've come to behavioral science 6 months ago who don't have formal training, but who are brilliant. And they are moving the field forward, both by helping people on the ground with actual practice and by developing, often through encounters with human reality, theory.
So that is how it has been and how it is now. How do you think it's going to develop further? Or how do you want behavioral science to develop further, maybe even?
Okay, I'm immediately associating with my favorite chapter of the book, Noise, which is chapter 11, which was written in first draft by Danny Kahneman, and to which I contributed hardly anything. It's my favorite chapter, and it's a chapter on objective ignorance. And the idea is that it's in the nature of the world that predicting how things are going to be, at least in the not near future, can be really, really hard. And when we don't get it right, it's because of the nature of the beast, that is prediction, rather than the nature of the beast, meaning humanity. It's not that we have we're biased or noisy necessarily. It's just that there are things that can't be predicted. So I want to be careful about predicting the future of behavioral science. This is kind of behaviorally informed caution about predictions about behavioral science. Still, I would like to see, in terms of practice, intense focus on human suffering and its alleviation, whether we're talking about health or safety or mental illness or chronic pain or deprivation. And there are many domains in which great progress can be made relatively quickly. So for programs that are potentially going to benefit people, victims of domestic violence, people who are trying to get permits, people are trying to get licenses, people are trying to get money or education, to have a behaviorally informed attack on sludge, understood as administrative burdens, can be a relatively low-cost generator of very big gains. So sludge reduction plays a significant role in the new edition of Nudge, and it also is the name of a little book that I appear to have coming out. And it is something that the United Nations is really focused on. And I can say in the US government, we are focused on it also as a way of ensuring that people who suffer / benefit from inertia or cognitive scarcity or maybe unrealistic optimism aren't defeated by administrative burdens and paperwork requirements. I think in terms of larger things, we are learning more and more about the social and cognitive obstacles to, let's say, better and longer lives for people. The book Scarcity by Eldar Shafir and Sendhil Mullainathan is one of the best, I think, in the last 15 years. And it refers to cognitive scarcity, meaning if you're busy or poor or lonely or hungry, you're kind of focused on particular things and your attention is taken away because you're in a kind of cognitive tunnel from other things that matter. And how to incorporate that empirical project into public policy, that's a prime imperative. I do think on the theoretical side, for behavioral science / behavioral economics to work toward a more unified framework is a very good idea. And there's a lot of work in the last 2 or 3 years on attention as a potential unifier of some of the disparate findings. And the work on behavioral inattention seems to me a very good frontier for science.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing list of things I do in fact hope will develop. I think a question I should have asked you much earlier as we talked about your background is, do you think your background, specifically having been in law, provides you with quite a unique perspective on behavioral science, but also on human functioning?
Thank you for that. I think it gives me a topic which is usefully informed by behavioral science and sometimes is good fodder for behavioral science. So the fact that there's constitutional law about freedom of various sorts and equality, and then there's tort law about accidents and contract law about agreements, to go back and forth between the legal principles and the behavioral findings, I think is productive. And there are people who are all over the world demonstrating that. One of my heroes here is Oren Bar-Gil, who happens to be at Harvard, but he's a terrific behavioral economist who has economics training and knows law. And the back and forth is very productive, I think, for him. You can see sometimes in law an implicit understanding of human behavior, which might turn out to be impressively refined or concerningly naive. And in both cases, it's really interesting.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And we are very aware of the time, and we may have just run out of your time. So we just want to say thank you so much, Cass, for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to talk to us. We feel like very small fish.
No. A big fish. And what your work is extraordinary, and I really thank you for this.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
What an amazing way to get started on our third season. Just, interviewing I would say a rather big fish. Now, it was an absolute pleasure talking to Cass. I mean, Cass, thank you so much for making the time. From what we've gathered from our interview, you don't exactly have time to spare. I especially like this comment about how he's just incredibly efficient at managing time, how it just does not pose any type of issue to him. Where I'm like, I guess some people are just born efficient. I guess some people just are.
I mean, hey, it makes sense, the amount of work Cass has done. And I do want to say that Cass was so lovely to interview as well. And yeah, I don't know, one of these people who you just never think you would ever personally interact with. So it was kind of surreal, but amazing.
It's not like we're going to run into him.
No. Well, I don't know. We'll just turn up outside of his office.
Yeah, it's not like we're just gonna casually bump into him, because we will casually show up on the Harvard campus or just, in the Oval Office or wherever Cass is currently, living his best life. We don't know. But yeah, no, it's just the idea. I mean, he's written so many things, both academic and then, of course, the more popular science books, which I know for a fact are incredibly, incredibly popular. I mean, I'm pretty sure this new updated version of Nudge, which came out on the start of August this year, is just, I'm pretty sure it's already breaking sales records as we speak. So, yeah. It's just really interesting.
It's super interesting. And what I kind of love the most is how we got to hear about this amazing meet cute origin story of this partnership between Thaler and Sunstein.
I mean, I love that he wrote him a letter. It's like the old school version of sliding into the DMs. He slid into the DMs, he got completely ignored, and then later he had lunch with him. I'm like, that works.
Look, they made a movie, The Beautiful Mind, about John Nash. So someone needs to buy the rights to this story because it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
It's very nicely told. But then again, I have a feeling Sunstein, Cass, is a pretty decent narrator. Some will argue, after having written God knows how many books, with 7 dead in the cupboard.
Yeah.
I haven't even written 7 books, let alone that I have got 7 books just, laying somewhere where I'm like, no, this is not right. This won't see the light of day.
Go easy on yourself. He's got much more of a head start on you in terms of writing books. Come on.
No, but it's just amazing. I have a lot of respect for someone who clearly just enjoys writing that much. Is clearly very good at managing his time for writing. And then, as he casually dropped throughout the conversation, there are more books forthcoming. I mean, what can you say to that?
I know. What a way to start our third season. If you are new here and you're dropping in because you wanted to hear a bit about what Cass Sunstein had to say, we don't blame you. Welcome to Questioning Behaviour. And if you've listened to some episodes before, welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. We have so many great interviews where we can't wait to share with you on the forthcoming season. And yeah. It's going to be great. So thank you so much for listening, guys.
Yeah, guys, as always, we hope you thought this was a great episode. We hope you have a great week. And we hope to see you again next week with a guest who is also just as awesome as Cass Sunstein.
That is a big promise.
Yup. Bye, guys.
You're the dummy that don't believe in science. All your projects always be denying. You're the one I love